Hi everybody, my name's Alicia Branch and I'm the owner and maker of Alicia Be Creative. Today I'm going to be showing you how I created this spring-inspired tumbler using none other than scrapbook paper. I found my scrapbook paper at Michael's, but you can pick up scrapbook paper and many designs at any of your local craft stores. This is actually the first time that I've ever created a V-split tumbler, and you'll see what I mean in the tutorial, but this is the first time I've ever made this design and I'm so excited and so pleased with how it came out. So let's stop all the gabbing and let's just hop right in. So to start, you'll need scrapbook paper, your fully prepped and sanded cup. I'm using a 20-ounce skinny from Maker Flow. You'll additionally need scissors, a paintbrush, Mod Podge, and a medicine cup for your Mod Podge. So first you'll see I'm going to be using my medicine cup in my matte Mod Podge that I just got from Michael's and pouring just a little bit into the cup, which I'm going to use to apply the scrapbook paper to the tumbler. So next I'm going to take my soft paintbrush, which I just got from the local craft store, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my tumbler down and decide how far up on the cup I want the scrap paper to show. So this is kind of just trial and error. You can go as far up as you want, you can go, lower down. It kind of just depends on how much of the scrapbook paper you want to show on your tumbler specifically. So once you've kind of lined up where you want your scrapbook paper to be, you're going to just mark the very bottom edge of your cup so that you can use the scissors to cut above that line. I always say cut above that line. That way you have a little bit extra edge, just in case, your lining up is a little bit off and you have a little bit of wiggle room or so to play with. You can certainly put away that other scrapbook paper and utilize that for another cup later. Then you kind of are going to want to measure that point back up on your cup, making sure it's even. And I like to remeasure and make sure that it's going to meet on the back side to just make sure I have everything kind of lined up where I need it to be. And then just using my paintbrush and Mod Podge, I'm going to apply the Mod Podge to the back of my scrapbook paper, literally almost the entire piece. That way I can just apply it to the tumbler and then press down. So next I'm going to just push my scrapbook paper with the Mod Podge onto my tumbler where I need it, and then use additional Mod Podge in thin layers just to make sure that the edges of the scrapbook paper are flush against the cup. You want to make sure that the scrapbook paper is pushed flush and that there's no pockets of air or kind of wrinkles in your scrapbook paper, because that'll make it much more difficult to epoxy the cup later. Then you'll see I'm going to use the scissors just to cut the bottom edge of the scrapbook paper and make sure that I am getting as close to that edge as possible. There are going to be little pieces that are going to stick up. Again, it's not perfect, and I don't have a cup edging tool, which I really need to invest in and purchase. That way it makes this part a little bit easier. But what you're going to do is you're going to push those bottom edges, anything that may be sticking up, applying more Mod Podge if you need to make sure that that bottom edge is as smooth as possible. Now that my scrapbook paper has been applied to the tumbler and I'm happy with where it's placed, I'm going to actually mark off the edge of that scrapbook paper just with blue painter's tape so that I can do the next steps. So you don't have to tape it off at this point in time because, again, I'm not doing the glittering quite yet, but I just figured I might as well save myself an extra step and just go ahead and tape off the edges now. That way I can apply my coats of Mod Podge to seal in my scrapbook paper, and then as soon as those are dry, be able to move into my glittering process. So again, you're just going to follow the edges of that scrapbook paper with your blue painter's tape. You'll see that I use my X-Acto knife to cut the edges and make sure that I'm making a perfect V on both ends, and that my scrapbook paper or my painter's tape is not covering my scrapbook paper, so that when I apply the Mod Podge, I don't have to worry about the blue painter's tape pulling up on top or pulling up my scrapbook paper. Again, so here I am using my X-Acto knife to make sure that where my tape meets on both sides of the cup, that it's a perfect V. That way I don't have to pull this tape up in order to glitter. So again, just cutting those edges and making sure everything is smooth on the cup, and that way I can move on to my next steps, which would be to apply my Mod Podge. onto my scrapbook paper and seal. What I will say is be extremely careful with these X-Acto knives. I have nicked myself quite a few times because they are quite sharp. So just be careful when you're doing this step and making sure that your fingers are not in the way, because nothing is worse than getting a cut with a X-Acto knife, that's for sure. So next you'll see I'm going to be applying Mod Podge, the same Mod Podge that I used to apply the scrapbook paper, and I'm using very thin coats on top of my scrapbook paper. And this is to make sure that the scrapbook paper is sealed in. That way when we move into the epoxy, it doesn't create wet spots from the epoxy. So again, I'm doing 4 thin coats of epoxy on top of my scrapbook paper and paying very close attention to the bottom edge and making sure that, again, those edges are pushed as flush down as possible on the bottom edge of my cup. That way I don't run into any issues of lifting of the scrapbook paper when we get to the epoxying step. So 4 thin layers of Mod Podge on top of the scrapbook paper. I do let my Mod Podge dry between each step, which you need to make sure that you do. That way you don't create any fogginess in your scrapbook paper. So next I'm going to be applying glitter, which is my favorite part. So I'm using Arteza paints as the adhesive for my glitter. So I'm using kind of like a royal blue, I think it was, or cobalt blue for the Arteza acrylic paint. And then I'm using 2020 from Peachy Olive Glitters as the glitter for the blue base of this cup. So I'm applying the paint in thin enough layers, but making sure that it's still wet when I go to apply my glitter. It is important in this step that if you do choose to do it this way, that you do this quickly, if you will, because you don't want your paint to dry and then for you to have bald spots within your glitter. You can always go over those should you need to, but if you work quickly, you won't really have to worry about going over and doing a second coat on top of this glitter. What I absolutely love about Peachy Olive Glitters is that I really only need 1 coat of coverage in order to ensure that my cup is entirely glittered, which is amazing and awesome, because then I don't have to spend the time to wait for it to dry and then seal it and then apply a second coat of glitter. So I absolutely love that as part of these Peachy Olive Glitters that I have. So again, I'm using 2020 from Peachy Olive Glitters. I'm just applying the Arteza paint as my base coat and then going straight over that with my glitter. And patting down and reapplying any bald spots that I may see if I missed with the paint. So once I've applied the blue glitter onto my cup, I'm going to take just a dry brush that I just have, a soft dry brush if you will, and kind of brush off any glitter that may have made its way onto the scrapbook paper before I move into the next step. So this glitter has not fully dried, or the paint under it has not fully dried, but I felt fully confident to be able to remove the tape and then apply the second glitter. That way I didn't have to wait the time for it to dry. So I'm just removing that blue painter's tape that was under or between the glitter and the scrapbook paper so that I can apply my next coats of glitter. What I'm going to be using next is Seacrest Beach from, again, Peachy Olive Glitters. And what I did, because I didn't have a color paint that kind of matched, is I just mixed up kind of an orangey pinky color that I thought best matched my Seacrest Beach. That way I could have that again as my adhesive instead of having to do the Mod Podge or the epoxy method way to apply glitter. So in this step, when you're applying your acrylic paint, you're going to want to make sure that you're going slow. I tried to go pretty slow in this area because I wanted to make sure that I didn't get any of the acrylic paint on either my scrapbook paper or my blue glitter. Now again, you are going to be covering up these areas with vinyl, but I didn't want it to be so far down that you'd be able to see, orange on top of the blue or see any of my paint on my scrapbook paper. So certainly go slow when you're doing this section to make sure that you're not getting any acrylic paint or any glitter in areas that you don't want the glitter to be. So again, I'm just applying that orangish pinky color of acrylic paint that I mixed together onto that white section and then applying my glitter right on top of that until I've fully covered that entire white section in the center. I did have to go back in a couple spots and kind of touch up where I had a little bit of a bald spot or I hadn't gotten my acrylic paint all the way down. Which is nice that you're able to do that with the acrylic paint right on top of your glitter and not mess anything up. So now that my glitter has been applied in both sections, I'm just going to take that same dry brush that I used when I glittered the blue section and just use that again to brush off any excess glitter that I may have gotten onto my scrapbook paper. Now that both sections of my glitter are completely dry, I'm going to be applying Rust-Oleum 2x clear gloss spray to my tumbler. I clear gloss spray my tumbler probably about 2 or 3 coats, I want to say, making sure it dries in between. And that's to make sure that when I do go to apply the epoxy, that none of my glitter makes it into any of my other sections. Then I'm going to move into epoxying. So for my first layer, I mixed about 30 mLs of epoxy, and I think I only used about 20 or 25 mLs on my first coat. Then I waited about 6 hours, let it spin for 6 hours to slightly cure, and then I immediately went in and did a flood coat for my second coat, which was about 20 mLs of epoxy. Once you've applied your layers of epoxy, I usually wait and let it spin for probably 1 to 2 minutes, and then I go in with my torch and pop any micro bubbles that I may see and just make sure that it's completely smooth. Now that my cup has cured for 12 hours, I'm going to go directly into sanding. You'll see that I'm using my Dremel for the top edge of my cup, which is usually the roughest area of the cup, if you will. So I'm just using that Dremel to create that fine line of stainless steel. That way my final coats of epoxy will seal that top edge and seal everything in all together. You'll see that I am actually going to wet sand my cup. So just applying a little bit of water to the cup and using my 220 grit sandpaper to sand on top of the cup. So there wasn't a whole lot of sanding that was needing, but there were some, minor bumps and things that I needed to address with sandpaper. And then obviously the top rim and the bottom edge, if you will, to make sure that everything was smooth. That way I was going to get a completely smooth finish during my final coats of epoxy. So after you're finished sanding, however much sanding you feel you need to do, you are then going to wash off your cup with dish soap and water, and then just dry with paper towels. That way there isn't any oils or any grit from the sandpaper on your cup. That way we can move into the next steps of the tutorial. Now that the cup is clean, we are going to use painter's tape to kind of paint or tape off that bottom edge of the cup, which is still white. It has been epoxied, but it is obviously still white and doesn't quite match the cup. So we're gonna tape off the bottom edge of this cup. I'm just using blue painter's tape, and then I will put saran wrap around the rest. And we're gonna use the satin ink blue paint for the bottom. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I created the decal. So I'm using Design Space on my phone, and I just decided I wanted this cup to be a spring cup and found a Live Life in Full Bloom image from just the regular Design Space image. So I decided that I wanted, though, the colors of the cup or the decal to match the cup. So you'll see right now I'm changing the different colors of the vinyl so that it prints on the colored vinyls that I want. So I'm putting the words Live Life in Full Bloom in a coral orange color that would match my Seacrest Beach. And then I'm doing the leaves and the flowers in white. So you can just select those areas and change the color just by selecting the color and going into layers to make sure that you're selecting the right sections. So once I do that, I then want to make sure that my decal is sized to about 3 inches in width. I think that was about 2.5 or 2.79 in height. So then at that point, I'm going to go back into layers because I realized that I didn't weld my spots together. So I'm welding the words together so that prints on the same section and not in different small pieces. And then all of the leaves and flowers that are in white, I'm welding together so it prints on one square. So then you're just going to click Make It. And then here is sort of the shot of the two mats so that again, it's all together and not each small piece. And then you just click Print. Okay, so somehow I managed to not record me applying any of the decals whatsoever, but I just used transfer tape to apply those to the cup. So after that, I then applied 2 final coats on the cup to seal it, and then it was perfectly ready to go after that 3-day cure time to its new owner. If you like this video, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and also don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Bye guys!